Launched as a replacement for the company's highly popular Corniche, the Rolls-Royce Camargue was an interesting break from tradition for the prestige car maker, in that it was the first model in the product lineup to be designed outside the Rolls-Royce firm, the result being a car that to this day continues to polarize enthusiasts of the brand as either a bold step outside of its conventional appeal to a more conservative clientele, or a needless attempt to maintain enthusiasm for the marque through its controversial restyling, thereby creating what is still debated to be the worst Rolls-Royce ever made. During the post-war era, Rolls-Royce had seen a huge surge in sales due to a rapid improvement in its technology and design, combined with a radical social change that swept the world as the lines of the traditional class structure became blurred in the 1940s and 50s. The usual aristocratic customer base of the Rolls-Royce brand, which comprised established gentry, leaders of industry, and business magnates, being swiftly replaced by a new wave of celebrity clients that comprised stars of stage and screen who had climbed the social ladder through music, TV, and film, thus meaning that, in order to remain the most sought-after car marque in the world, Rolls-Royce was forced to adapt so as to maintain its appeal with this budding new market. The Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, which was launched in 1955 as a replacement for the post-war Silver Wraith and Silver Dawn, being a strong seller, but was indeed the last of the true aristocratic Rolls-Royce models. The long bonnet ahead of a regal cabin that mimicked the classic pre-war Phantoms and Silver Ghosts, becoming distinctly out of place as trends moved away from chauffeur-driven luxury cars to ones which placed more of an emphasis on the driver. To meet this demand, the Silver Cloud was replaced in 1965 with the Silver Shadow, a car of dimensions that generally matched those of regular family saloons of the period, but introduced various technical innovations that would help it appeal to the modern affluent driver, including it being the first ever Rolls-Royce model to be built on a monocoque chassis rather than the previous separate chassis employed by the Silver Cloud, and through the employment of a brand new 6.75-litre Rolls-Royce L-Series V8 engine, placed a far greater emphasis on performance and driving manners so as to win over the rising stars of Hollywood and the West End, the result being a sales coup for Rolls-Royce as Silver Shadow swept out of the Crewe factory to conquer the global luxury car market, complemented by a dedicated coupe and convertible variant dubbed the Silver Shadow two-door Saloon for the hardtop and the Silver Shadow drophead coupe for the convertible, both of which had their production outsourced to various coach-building firms such as James Young and Mulliner Park Ward, depending on customer specification, while the flagship of the fleet, and one that maintained Rolls-Royce's connection with regal clients, including the British royal family, was the Phantom 6 of 1968, an ultra-luxury machine that maintained the aristocratic splendour of pre-war Rolls-Royces, and through it being the last model to maintain the separate chassis design, would be built on customer demand by specified coach builders. Come the late 1960s, however, Rolls-Royce were eager to refresh their image so as to continue distancing themselves from the aristocratic looks of the Silver Shadow and the Phantom 6, and thus in the spring of 1969 began development on what was dubbed Project Delta, a proposed replacement for the Silver Shadow two-door Saloon that would become the very flagship of the Rolls-Royce family of cars, appealing to the most affluent of potential customers, with an emphasis primarily on the American market, where a sudden rise in the newly established personal luxury car, as exhibited on the likes of the 1967 Cadillac Eldorado and the Lincoln Mark III, meant driver trends on this particular market were moving towards models of exceptional luxury, but with performance pretensions so as to give them an edge over regular affluent motors, Rolls-Royce opting, for the first time, to break from tradition and allow the styling of the car to be penned by an external design firm for a full production model, the British car maker turning to the Carrozzeria Pininfarina of Turin, Italy, so as to develop the looks of their new model, as they had earlier experience with the firm when designing the unique Bentley T-Series Coupe Speziale of 1968, with Chief of the Styling Department, Paolo Martin, being chosen to undertake this work, Martin looking to his previous work on the exceptionally handsome Fiat 130 Coupe of 1969 as inspiration for a somewhat angular model that perfectly balanced traditional Rolls-Royce luxury with Italian styling flair. By 1970, with Martin continuing to draft his early concepts for the new Rolls-Royce model, the project was officially launched by the company under the code name DY20, D for Delta, Y signifying it was based on the Silver Shadow platform, which itself was codenamed SY, and 20 being short for its 120-inch wheelbase. The general design principles of the DY20 being to integrate as many mechanics as possible from the Silver Shadow so as to save costs and development time, including the use of its 6.75-litre V8 engine and suspension systems, while in order to help add to the car's lavish internal functions, the DY20 would be fitted with the world's most sophisticated bi-level automatic air conditioning system, the expense of fitting this unit alone being more than the entire assembly cost of a British Leyland Mini Clubman, the intention for Rolls-Royce being for the car to enter sales from 1972 as a replacement for the Silver Shadow two-door Saloon, initially on the UK and European market, followed by a 1973 release for the model in the United States. Unfortunately, development of the DY20 came at a very bad time for the wider Rolls-Royce group, as following encouragement by the then Minister of Technology Tony Benn, Rolls-Royce had signed on to be the exclusive jet engine provider for the upcoming Lockheed L-1011 TriStar widebody airliner, the production of which would require Rolls-Royce to create its first ever high-bypass turbofan engine. The amount of research and testing required in order to develop this new engine, dubbed the RB211, being far greater than what Rolls-Royce had originally anticipated, causing the project to run far over budget and fall heavily behind schedule, while due to the stringent contract signed between Rolls-Royce and Lockheed, the British engine maker could not back out of the deal without facing ruinous litigation as filed by its American partners, thus leading inevitably to the bankruptcy of Rolls-Royce Limited on February 4, 1971, with a debt of £75 million, with all production and projects being halted as the official receiver stepped in to try and save the firm from total collapse. As a result of the audit undertaken, the Rolls-Royce luxury car division was confirmed to be fiscally solvent, as orders for the Silver Shadow remained strong all across the globe, while a review of the DY20 project concluded that development costs for the scheme would not be enough to put the car division at financial risk, but recommended that the launch date for the car be pushed back to 1975 at the earliest, so as to allow the company to balance out its monetary situation, the Rolls-Royce car division eventually being split away from the engine builder and sold to the engineering conglomerate Vickers Limited in 1973, while the Rolls-Royce engine company was nationalised by the government of Prime Minister Edward Heath so as to bring the RB211 project to fruition through taxpayer money and revive its fortunes. Rolls-Royce, in the meantime, choosing to maintain sales for the Silver Shadow two-door Saloon by renaming it during 1971 to the Rolls-Royce Corniche, reviving the moniker of a 1939 prototype that was based on the underpinnings of the Bentley Mark V and designed in collaboration with several third parties, including acclaimed French designer Georges Paulin, while the car itself was built by Parisian firm Carrosserie Van Vuren, the 1939 Rolls-Royce Corniche never going into full production due to the onset of World War II, with the single prototype, after a 15,000-mile endurance test across continental Europe, eventually being destroyed during an air raid on the French port of Dieppe while awaiting shipment back to the UK during the Battle of France. With development continuing, H.J. Mulliner Park Ward, who already built the bodies for the Corniche, were chosen to manufacture the bodies for the DY20 project, and in the summer of 1972, the first prototype, D1, was released and tested heavily to maintain the standard of reliable excellence that Rolls-Royce had been known for, with the car being warmly received initially as the Rolls-Royce team considered the model to appear far more futuristic than the Silver Shadow, with Rolls-Royce giving paramount assistance to H.J. Mulliner Park Ward's staff as they rigorously put the cars together, the body of the first production prototype, D3, being attached to the front and rear subframe assemblies of the normal Silver Shadow on January 18, 1973, all of which was closely guarded with maximum security so as to ward off industrial espionage by Mercedes-Benz or Jaguar, the car subsequently being delivered to the experimental department to begin a period of intensive development work. From May 1973 and through 1974, production increased, but was still subject to extreme security, with the production sequence for the car being initial body assembly at the Mulliner Park Ward Works in London, which was then transported to Crewe in Cheshire to be mated to a shortened version of the Silver Shadow platform, with all mechanics and the engine included, before being shipped back to Mulliner Park Ward in London for final trimming, general finishing, and for testing to take place at their Hythe Road proving ground in Willesden. Rolls-Royce, in the months leading up to the official launch of the car in early 1975, opting to christen the upcoming model the Rolls-Royce Camargue, in reference to an area around the delta of the River Rhône in France, and a continuation of the naming convention among its models for luxurious Gallic regions associated with the classic Grand Tour of the 1930s, such as the Corniche, the Rolls-Royce Camargue also being distinguishable from its stablemates through the inclusion of a slanted chrome grille that was tilted forward by 7 degrees to give a more streamlined appearance, almost a mimic of the slanted Rolls-Royce grille adopted for the fictional Fab 1 that appeared on the British children's TV series Thunderbirds during the mid-1960s. Eventually, the Rolls-Royce Camargue, as only the 17th new model launched by the company in its first 69 years of trading, was presented at a press ceremony in January 1975 held at Catania, Sicily, before being formally put on sale to the public from March 5th of the same year at a cost of £29,250, or £208,300 in 2023, which, for context, was the equivalent of a luxurious 7-bedroom detached house in the home counties of England, or 9 mini Clubmans. While in the Rolls-Royce product lineup, the Corniche it was originally intended to replace cost a mere £19,013, with even the flagship Phantom 6 struggling to match up in terms of price, as a regular limousine, with all the options and bespoke coachwork built on demand, cost only £21,352. Proposals for the Camargue to enter sales on the American market being delayed due to problems fitting the left-hand drive models with US specification running gear, and thus meant production of American versions did not commence until August 1975, with the first examples departing for dealers in the USA during early 1976, with a price tag of $147,000, or $813,400 in 2023, thus making it unequivocally the most expensive production car ever put on sale at the time. In terms of performance, the Rolls-Royce Camargue, thanks to its general use of silver shadow underpinnings, mechanics and engine, was not too dissimilar to that of the regular Saloon with a top speed of 119 miles an hour and a 0 to 60 time of 11.3 seconds. Rolls-Royce not officially disclosing the power output of their V8 engine, though unofficial testing revealed that the 6.75-litre power unit could yield approximately 200 horsepower. Cars being shipped to the United States, in contrast to the general rule of European car makers to aggressively price their cars to be as competitive as possible with domestic American and Japanese products, being priced at a 15% higher retail figure than the UK and European model due to the cost of safety and pollution engineering needed to adapt the limited number of cars being expected to sell in the USA to American legislation. Rolls-Royce forecasting that it would sell approximately 30 Camargues per annum in North America, and that the sheer prestige of a machine well and truly in a class of its own would see this number remain consistent for the foreseeable future. Although rapid currency depreciation during the late 1970s, caused by the ongoing effects of the 1973 oil crisis and recession, would greatly raise the price of the Camargue in both the UK and America, meaning its projected sales struggled to remain consistent year on year, while as great an emphasis as possible was placed into the pioneering use of the automatic split-level climate control system, which was the first of its kind ever implemented on a production car and had taken 8 years to develop. However, the economic and legislative factors working against the Camargue were but a fraction of the general perception this machine garnered upon its launch, with initial reviews by both the press and the public being scathing at worst and ambivalent at best, the overarching condemnation of the Camargue being that it looked less like a Rolls-Royce and more like a Lincoln town car, its boxy angles and straight lines being compared unfavourably to the Corniche and the Silver Shadow, with many journalists commenting that, for the most expensive production car in the world, what customers were essentially getting was a Corniche endowed with a Fiat 130 coupe body that had a Rolls-Royce chrome grille and Spirit of Ecstasy yoked onto the front. Although despite the face value criticisms of the Camargue, the driving manners, performance and comfort were generally praised as being nothing short of what could be expected for a modern Rolls, its large size and 2.5-ton weight still being able to handle tightly and nimbly even at high speeds. The conclusion of the motoring press being that the model was a somewhat misguided attempt by Rolls-Royce to appeal solely to the export market, specifically the United States, but expected that if one was able to overlook its aesthetics, the car was still well worth Rolls-Royce money, as reflected in that the Camargue was completely sold out for its first year's worth of production even before the formal launch in April 1975, and that 70% of Camargues built were to be exported when compared to only 55% for the rest of the range. Regardless of the lukewarm reception, the Camargue remained a strong seller based on limited numbers throughout the late 1970s, and saw various changes to its mechanics and production that helped differentiate it further from its Silver Shadow progenitor, including the fitting of a higher performance Solix carburetor on all markets other than Australia, Japan and North America, a repositioned fuel tank, further engine updates for emissions compliance, rack and pinion steering to replace its recirculating ball, revised hydraulic rear suspension in 1978, and a headlamp wash white brush in 1979. While also in 1978, production of the Camargue moved to the Park Sheet Metal Company at Bedworth near Coventry, following the closure of the Park Ward factory in London during the same year, and soon afterwards a project was started to produce a turbocharged Bentley Camargue that would be sold in higher numbers at a lower retail price than the regular Rolls-Royce model, though in the end, with the upcoming Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit and Silver Spur saloon cars nearing their entry into production to replace the 15-year-old Silver Shadow, the company decided instead to create a dedicated Bentley version of those cars in the form of the Mulsanne Turbo of 1980. Although one Bentley Camargue was commissioned at customer specification in 1985, but was simply the regular Rolls-Royce Camargue with a Bentley badge and grille, thus making it the rarest and most desirable member of the Camargue range ever constructed. Other variations of the Camargue included two test mules, developed in late 1979, that were used for the testing of mechanical and other design elements that were to be incorporated into the Silver Spirit, including one example that was fitted with block headlamps from the upcoming Spirit, while in 1980, an Arabian sheikh with a passion for falconry requested that the Swiss car designer Franco Sbarro customize his 1978 Camargue into the one-off Rolls-Royce Camargue custom falconry sporting vehicle. Although it sometimes goes under the monikers including the hunting car of His Royal Highness, the hunting car, or the falconry sporting vehicle. The Subaru conversion including the replacement of the trunk lid with a custom panel that swings away to reveal a concealed extendable platform where the falconer can stand, an extendable support rod for the falcons, an electrically hinged windshield to allow for unencumbered peripheral vision in the field, and the removal of the doors in place of bars that can be pushed away into the coachwork, the cost of converting the falconry Camargue being $396,000. Entering the 1980s, the Rolls-Royce Camargue began to lose its sales edge as economic recessions continued to trouble luxury car sales in the wake of the 1979 Iranian Revolution, most affluent buyers opting to take on the less exclusive but still undeniably lavish Corniche rather than the bespoke and controversial flagship Camargue. This drop in output being coupled to an increase in the overall retail price to £83,112 in 1981, or £374,000 in 2023, with production numbers falling to around 20 to 25 cars per annum, and thus not enough to cover the costs of assembling this bespoke machine. 1986 proving to be the final year of Camargue production, as Rolls-Royce sought to cut overhead, as the luxury car market remained suppressed by wider global economics, although as one final hurrah for the Camargue, in order to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Rolls-Royce firm, 25 special edition snow white coupes with a red leather interior, commissioned by an American Rolls-Royce dealer, were outshopped from the Crewe factory, and came as standard with a myriad of luxury attributes, including an in-car phone, a leather attaché case, a silver fountain pen, and silver-plated flasks with a monogram of the owner. In the end, the very last Rolls-Royce Camargue would rumble off the production line on Christmas Eve 1986, bound for a Japanese customer, ending an 11-year assembly run in which 531 examples were built, the Camargue's departure from sales not being seen with great sentiment, as the production staff at Crewe focused instead on developing the Bentley brand with the upcoming Turbo R four-door saloon to replace the Mulsanne Turbo, and very soon the Rolls-Royce Camargue fell into obscurity as something of a forgotten venture into unknown territory for a company that would otherwise pride itself on the tradition of its mark. Second-hand prices for Camargues remaining at rock bottom throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, as perception of this machine remained largely hostile, although in recent years the car has seen something of a reappraisal by enthusiasts due to its rarity, its unique design, and the fact that, despite its controversial body shell, the Camargue maintained the standard of quality, comfort, luxury and performance expected for a Rolls-Royce of the time. This appreciation seeing second-hand prices rise substantially throughout the 2010s and into the 2020s, as a new generation of buyer comes to find a soft spot for Rolls-Royce's Italian adventure.